Welcome back to Darnell Grant Economics, and today we are continuing just where we left off. Our last video spoke about perfect competition with regards to market structures. Today we are doing the polar opposite. What fire is to water. What Thanos was to the Avengers. What Darth Vader was to the Jedi. The literal opposite of the spectrum is called the monopoly market structure. We're going to look at their pricing and output decisions. Firstly, we're going to identify the characteristics, and we're going to look at some comparisons of this market structure to another more pure market structure to determine exactly why monopolies may not be that good for society. All that on today's episode.
That's like a fight.
First things first, the characteristics. The first couple of things you want to know about monopolies are the very important characteristics. Number one being, there is only one single seller and many buyers. In the words of Kanye West, there's 1,000 yous, but only one of me. There are 1,000 buyers, unlimited amount of buyers, but only one person is selling the particular good or service. That leads us to the second characteristic, which is the good in question here is unique. In the past, we said it was homogeneous. No, there is no good like this one that is currently being produced. So it's extremely unique. The third characteristic is the fact that there are barriers to entry. Like there are things that prevent firms or make it impossible for competitive firms to enter this market to produce the same good or service. And last but not least, when it comes to that price thing, monopolies are the makers of it. They are the proverbial chefs. They get to set the price without anything hampering.
King Kong ain't got on me!
Nobody else to study about what that person. No. They choose the price to sell their unique commodity at to the hundreds of buyers because they are just the one individual seller. That's it for characteristics. And what we need to discuss as well is how do monopolies even end up in? Like how monopolies, why do they exist? And monopolies exist for a variety of reasons. First thing first is trade secrets. There are some goods that nobody know how to make it.
They be like, hey Brandon, what you got on? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, sweetheart.
Think about Angostura bitters from Trinidad. There are some instances where the monopoly is established due to the fact that the market size is so small. If you think about power supply services in most Caribbean islands, you would find there's a commonality. The Barbados Water Authority is the only person that sells pipe-borne water to households. If you think about the Jamaica Public Service Company, the only company to supply electricity to households in Jamaica, it's that way because of the size of the market. Another competitor just can't enter there and put up new electric poles. It's not going to work that way. The market is too small to cater for more than one supply of the commodity. We just don't have the resources to do that. Another reason why monopolies exist is just ownership of a resource. Sometimes the factor input that goes into making the good or service can't be found anywhere else. If I have to create a real weird example, it's like vibranium in Wakanda. It's like, why nobody else could make these things? Because you have no vibranium. So think about a resource that isn't found anywhere else and why this company can use it. And you're going to find yourself a monopoly. They just do that, or they are the monopoly because no one else has the factor input to go into the particular good or service. Those are just some of the reasons why monopolies exist. You could look up some more. Point. We need to actually dig into what the barriers to entry are. Like, what are the various types of barriers to entry that we see in monopolies? The first one you should mention are legal barriers to entry. Those things such as patents and trademarks that prevent competitors from producing a particular good or service for a particular amount of time. So typically pharmaceuticals, if you develop a drug, you're going to have 20 years to make it, and no one else could legally make it but you. The next barrier to entry you have is just capital costs. Think about it. Some industries are so startup cost heavy that it prevents or it reduces the entrance of new competitors. The next barrier to entry is literally what we call predatory pricing. Think about it. If you're a monopoly, right, and you're running so large, you have these economies of scale, and there's a competitor coming into your market, you could drop your price to the point where you'll be making less profit, but at this point, this price point, you also prevent another firm from entering the market and making a profit. You set the cost so low for the good that they cannot enter the market at a lower price than you. They are forced to enter at a higher price, which means they're not going to make any money, which means eventually this company will have to close down. The price you have set for the good is a price that forces them to run at a loss. And that's what we call predatory pricing. Other firms can't survive at that price. So that's why the monopoly sets it there purposefully to maintain their monopoly status. You know where we have to go. We need to talk about the diagrams. So follow me to open board. Let's discuss that. So what we have in front of us is just a basic axis. What goes onto the axis? Basic stuff. Price, quantity. Nothing we're not accustomed with. The first thing we want to note about a monopoly, however, is the fact that the MR curve is twice as steep as the AR curve. And I know some people might say, so what I mean? I don't really understand what I mean. Twice as steep, that really hits on for me. Well, what that means is it's twice as steep. So if the AR curve cuts the axis at 200, the MR curve is going to fall twice as fast. This is Darnell Grant of the Winning Granted channel here, and thank you for watching the video. What I want to ask is that you like and subscribe, because it does help the content reach other persons who could benefit from the content the same way you are benefiting now, right? Feel free to share the video with some of your classmates who may be having a hard time with some of the topics we are discussing as well. Also, if you're looking for classes, I do have classes available for Unit 1 Economics and Unit 2 Cape Economics. If you're interested, just message me at the number below so we can discuss how you could possibly join that class. Otherwise, enjoy the content as the AR curve, which means it's going to cut the axis at 100. Wherever AR curve is, half it, and that's where the MR curve intersects. All right, the next interesting thing we have to add to this curve is the presence of our MC curve. MC curve is the one that's always going to be on all the diagrams, and it allows us to determine exactly where the monopolist is going to choose to price their particular good. How? The monopolist uses something we call marginal pricing. Marginal pricing literally looks at where MC cuts MR to determine the profit maximizing output. So literally right here is where it intersects, and how they choose to produce the quantity at this point. Let's call that Q star. And if you want to determine, hey, what is the revenue this firm is going to make when they're selling this amount, we'll be taking this quantity and extrapolating it up to the demand curve, which is also the aggregate, is also the average revenue curve. And then you may ask, so how do we know what is the cost? Well, one curve is still missing here. One of the curves you should be familiar with, and it is called the AC curve. The AC curve. The AC curve, as you can see, our principle still holds true. The MC curve cuts the AC curve at its lowest point. And I've had some students ask me, sir, sometimes you don't need to get perfectly even. Your examiner understands that you are not a printer. So get it close. Look at what I did. Like it cuts the lowest portion. It just having the lowest portion a little bow-like, but that's fine. So we then ask ourselves, what is the cost this firm is going to face when they're producing that amount? Simply is where this quantity line touches your AC curve. Now, based on this diagram, let's call that C star. This monopoly is making a profit. Why? As you can see, the entire revenue zone, I'll go with red there, the entire revenue zone is all here, right? Revenue, price by quantity. The cost they are facing, however, is only here, which means there's this amount left over on top here that shows you the monopolist's profit in the short run. Because we distinguish between the short run and the long run with perfect competition. Comfort to you is this diagram stays the same in the short run and in the long run once barriers to entry are maintained.
There's only one thing better than owning a vault full of cold, hard cash, and that's swimming in it.
Once nothing changed with regards to the barriers to entry, once nobody still knows how to make it, once you still have exclusive ownership of the resources to make the commodity, etc., this diagram stays the same.
I gotta do it, man.
That's important to understand. And with that, this is the diagram for a monopoly. You have to be able to draw this and understand this. We're not done with the diagram yet. We need to consider something called deadweight loss. And in order for you to see the area of deadweight loss, we are going to compare the output decisions of the perfect competition to the output decisions of the monopoly. Because if you remember, the perfectly competitive firm would have produced at the point where its MC is equal to, well, let me use a different color here, go back to red, where MC is equal to AR, which is also equal to a demand, which was also equal to MR at that point in time, right? Because for the perfect competition, all of these things were equal, right? So that's where they would have chosen to produce. The quantity would have been here relatively to the monopoly. As you notice, the monopoly is operating on the downward sloping portion of the AC curve, meaning they could actually produce more efficiently, but we don't have to.
Hard work.
We're already making as much money as we can. And if you were to make more, the price of the commodity would come down. We don't want that. So what we're going to do is engage in something called satisficing to get that out of the way. We're not producing on that. We are already being inefficient. So that is one bad thing there. But let's look at the deadweight loss. Now, if you remember what consumer and producer surplus was, right? You know that the price line, and then you have the portion that's between the demand curve and the price line, and the portion that's above the supply curve and the price line. Good, you can keep that in mind. Another thing you need to keep in mind is the MC curve. The MC curve is given by the upward sloping portion of the marginal cost curve. If you would have done shutdown point, you would have been told this by now. If not, you need to go into your textbook and read what shutdown point is and why the upward sloping portion of the MC curve being your supply curve actually makes sense. But let's move on to deadweight loss. So cool. So technically we have our supply curve here. Area of deadweight loss is the area of consumer and producer surplus that is lost out due to the fact that the monopoly is underproducing the good or service. Remember, the perfectly competitive firm would have been operating at the bottom of the AC curve, not to mention where MC equal to AR, which is equal to MR. So the triangular area here, this area is the deadweight loss. Both consumers and producers lose out on this. This is a total loss to society, a loss of welfare to society by the fact that a monopoly is present here and they are not producing their productive optimum. And this problem stems from the fact that monopolies could control their own price. For the perfectly competitive firm, their demand curve was one flat, perfectly elastic line. Now you have a downward sloping MR, you have a downward sloping demand curve, which is equal to AR as well, because of the fact that they can control their own prices. That's what makes it so bad for society. And as a result, we end up getting less commodity than we should get, and we also get it at an elevated price. So we lose both ways. And that's the thing about monopolies. They are not operating at the socially optimal level of output where price is equal to marginal cost. That's fundamentally why monopolies are bad for society. Typically, in exams in the past, they have asked you to compare the output of the perfectly competitive firm to that of the monopoly. And you do it simply by identifying the perfectly competitive output on the diagram. Then comparing that to the monopoly's choice of output. And we literally just did that. Shade the correct area, show them this is the total welfare loss to society because of the fact that the monopoly is present, and the mark should be yours once you label everything correctly as well. And please note, this situation persists indefinitely once the barriers to entry remain. If your pattern is still in place, if nobody can find out how to make the commodity, you are locked in with regards to higher prices and lower quantity being supplied to the market as well. So that's it for monopolies. Very short video, but once you do understand how we are drawing these curves, what's profit max, what's productive optimum, we should move quite quickly through these. All right, so see you on the next episode. Bye.
Fight! Fight!
Yalla, assalamu alaikum.
قدام المدرسه المديره هتطرد يخص مو وقته ده